So Beatrice had puppies, 5 puppies,
Okay.
August 12th.
Okay.
When 3 left, I think it was when 3 left, or maybe when there were still 3 remaining and 2 had left, was the very first fight in the yard. And they simply, because now it's simply, to where we progressed, they rose up on their rear legs, full formation up, at each other. I was with them. Somehow I was able to break through.
How did you do that?
I don't recall anymore because I faced so much trauma after this.
Okay.
So I don't recall specifically how I did it. Was it with my voice, with my body? I don't recall.
Just like blacked out?
It's
Kinda.
because the incidences afters have marked me more than that one.
I see, sure.
So it's like, that's the very first, Beatrice. Beatrice, sit. So that's the first one. There will be a second one in the yard. Doug, you were present. I think there was one time you sensed, and you
Yeah, it seemed like it was coming. But
it was coming, and you walked in between, headed it off.
it's difficult. I wish I could say that there was one single common denominator in all these instances, but I will say that on a couple of occasions it seems to revolve around greetings. And so our son came over somewhere around Christmas, got down on the floor for them to come up, and they were initially fine, and I can't remember if Dixie was there first, do you think, maybe? Or was
I wasn't in the room when it transpired.
Someone didn't like, one of the two of them didn't like that the other one, I guess, was getting attention. I'm not sure how to really define that. And so it broke out. At that point, there was no toy, there was no food, there was no, there didn't seem to be some other contributing factor other than my son was getting a greeting and somebody didn't like it.
Do we know who was doing the greeting?
That's just it. I can't tell who was there first.
Okay.
I can tell you today we had a stranger, someone unknown to them, come over to the house. Dixie was there with one of the puppies, and the only one that's left, and they did their greeting, and that went kind of okay. And then because we are keeping them separate for now, so I pulled her back further into the kitchen, and this individual's in our laundry room. And then when Beatrice came down and went to do her greeting with the individual from the kitchen, she saw this and then barked and growled, and then this one appeared to not want to hear that. She technically is the alpha because she's the oldest. She's like 4. She's a year and a half.
2 in March.
And then both, barking from afar at each other and growling and all that had to be pulled apart. I think if they hadn't been leashed, they might have gone for it.
Okay, so we had her in a separate room with the gate up.
Yeah.
Correct? And you said one of the puppies was out? Or?
One of the puppies was out, but the puppy had done the greeting along with her initially when the stranger came.
Okay, with the stranger coming in.
And so then
Okay.
it was her turn to come do the greeting, whatever.
Okay.
And meet the stranger.
And she was held by our daughter at a distance.
Yeah.
So we're at this point, they're on leashes and we don't let any more encounters occur. So our daughter, sorry Doug, is 20 feet away holding Dixie. And she brings in, I brought in Beatrice, one of us. You brought in Beatrice to greet the person, and she was not having it. She wants to.
So based on today, and the doggone thing is we've rarely seen that exact instant when it goes from 0 to 100. Decide whatever it is, if it's a person or if it's a toy, whatever it is, becomes so important that they have to destroy the other individual. I wish really had a better sense of that because that would help you with your process. But so today appeared to be more involved with, I don't know if resource guarding applies to people. Okay, so maybe she didn't like the fact that this one was having interaction with the stranger. It's like, oh, that's my person. I don't know how that works exactly. But
Sure, and I'll explain that.
And I'll give you a few more encounters. So there was an encounter where I was at the kitchen counter and Beatrice and Indy came to greet me. And she was over there. She was not happy. And she moved in and she went after Beatrice.
I can't remember if they were just out for a walk or, they had been away and she was doing something in the kitchen. They came to greet her. She was on the other side of the kitchen, saw that going down.
So this is Beatrice.
This is Beatrice.
That's Dixie?
Dixie.
Okay.
And so.
Who was the other one? You said Indy?
Indy's a puppy.
Indy's a remaining puppy. Okay.
He was a return.
And how many puppies do you have currently?
Just the one.
Just the one. Okay.
So there were 5. 5 were sold, 1 returned.
Okay.
So, greetings, yes.
Yeah, so the incident that caused the punctures and stitches was one of Dixie's habits is she wants everybody's toy. Like, you give her a toy, she's happy, but as soon as I give Indy a toy or Arrow or somebody, she wants their toy. She's going to go their toy. And I got annoyed that afternoon, so I thought, I'm going to give you a high-value toy. You go leave them alone. And I gave her a marrow bone. She's unhappy, she's in love, yada, yada. And I forget.
It's okay. Go ahead and set her like you did before. Yeah, there you go.
So she goes into, so she's working it. I don't pay attention because we've given them marrow bones before. They each have a marrow bone. They love them. And I'm in the kitchen cooking, and all of a sudden, hell has unleashed. They're between the coffee table and the couch, and Dixie's got her pinned, and I run in. This is already so many fights into it. I'm just traumatized, waiting for death to occur. So I, of course, do the wrong move. I reach in to grab her by her scruff, so she goes at my leg.
Yeah.
So no puncture, but 4 teeth marks, 2 huge bruises.
Okay.
Our son was home. Fortunately, he came running down the stairs because it's loud. And I was able to get his help, but he can take Dixie up to our bedroom, lock the door there. I ran her. But see, now what's happening, Beatrice wants vengeance. So after an attack, she's not done. She wants to go back in. So I grab her under her legs like this and run her to the little bathroom off the kitchen. But I need to go look at my leg.
Yeah.
Pain. So I leave her in the bathroom. I go to another bathroom. I look at my leg. I'm fine. But at that time, I see on my hand there's blood. And it's not my blood. So when I return to the bathroom, well, there's blood on the wall. And, it's bloody. So that was the blood drawn incident. And like since then, I mean, if we're not there, well, even if we pull them off, there has to be 2 people. Someone's got to hold her back. She wants at it.
Okay. When was the first incident?
So the puppies are born, let's see, October 7th or 8th is the departure of 2 pups. It could be the 15th of October, it could be the 20th.
Okay, and we're in January now.
We're in January.
So we're going back December, November, back to October, and she's a year and a half now. So she was a year.
2 in March.
Okay, so she was a year and 3 months at the time. Gotcha. Is this her first litter, or she had multiple?
So she's had 1 stillborn litter.
Okay. How long ago was that?
Last January she had a stillborn, then this was a successful litter. She's a very laid back dog.
Okay.
Very, like today with this anxiety, that's not her. Here in my house, she's the one laying still and this is the one going, what's happening? So it's a little reverse here where she's laying down and this one's anxious.
And you can sit her down again.
Yes.
So every time she stands up, I'm going to have you just do what you've been doing.
Yes.
Okay.
And so she's in her cycle, there's hormones present.
Okay, so they're both unspayed.
Yes.
Okay. So that was back in
6 episodes of fight.
Yeah. With 2 in 1 day.
The 2 in 1 day on Christmas Eve, the one transpired in the yard, and you tried to fling the water at them. That didn't work. I came out the broom because I've learned the broom is at least a stick to put between them. One of the things too, they've never been collared and leashed in the house.
So there's nothing to grab onto.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That's why I go like this, and
and never had to. I mean, I mean, they just got along fine. An annoying little sister, probably yes, but otherwise they're fine.
Okay.
Sit.
And I'm just making sure I'm hearing everything correctly. The first one was 2 puppies that just left. This one's 1 year and 3 months. And this was over someone coming in, right? Like it was a greeting episode.
No, the first one's in the yard.
Oh, that was the first one in the yard. Okay.
We're just playing. Puppies are playing. The dogs are playing.
In the incident, how many times was a puppy present?
The first, what would you say? The first 2 or 3 are with puppies and playtime in the yard.
And then we had one over a marrowbone.
Well, they're present because they're in the house, but it wasn't with just
That's
that.
in the middle of.
Like they could be the variable.
Right. That's what I'm trying to decipher. I'm trying to figure out what's the catalyst, right? So if one common denominator is like this always happens when someone enters the home, I can already know what the answer is, right?
It's a new development too. This is escalated. It
Correct.
never happened before.
So I can give you my theories.
Okay.
In the end, it doesn't matter, but it's just to kind of help you go like, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. Okay. Exactly. So it sounds like, just taking everything that I know, you had a catalyst, you had something that triggered tension, right? Now, the thing about dogs that people don't realize is sometimes, and you put it, or both of you actually put it correctly, is if we have unresolved tension, at some point somebody's got to go.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And that's where things start to escalate because it's unresolved tension. They're coexisting, but if one person or one dog does the wrong thing and the other dog's not feeling it that way, now we got conflict. Is it starts to feel like it's like you had 6 in the span of 4 months, right? 3.5 months is what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Right. In other cases, I get a client's like, oh yeah, they had a scuffle over food. That was 2 years ago. And then they had another scuffle over food recently, right? But there's a 2-year gap. So it's not like, so if there was unresolved tension, it would be over and over and over again, right? During those 2 years. They're like, no, and I go, then it's definitely the food, right? So then we can figure out a game plan to try to help prevent the problem, address the problem, which is resource guarding, and then set them up for success. In other cases, I've had, bring her back and then sit her down. Good job. There'll be a gap. There'll be another fight. And after that second fight, it's just boom, boom, boom. Now it's fight, right? And then I go, now we have unresolved tension, right? So one thing that I'm thinking about is the puppies. Potentially we're not seeing something and maybe maternal instinct kicking in. You know, that's one thing that I think about. Even though for you go, yeah, but previously it wasn't a problem. It doesn't mean that it can't become a problem, you know? So I did a consult this past Saturday. A gentleman had a Eurasier, super friendly social dog, love people, love humans. And then one day or one week he went out of town and his friend watched his dog. And during that time, his dog jumped up and bit somebody on a walk. Okay. And unfortunately the friend either is trying to cover up or, you know, doesn't want to give the full story. We only have a very small limited amount of information. So we can only make assumptions. But he's like, I would have never thought in a million years that my dog would have done that, you know, because all he's seen is friendly. And I'm like, well, it doesn't mean it can't happen, right? So same thing here. Whatever the reason is, like I said, it doesn't matter because it doesn't help the solution, okay? In this particular case, because now you have unresolved tension and conflict, if left unaddressed, potentially one decides to just take out the other. I had a case where when I came, the dog had already killed another dog. They had a pit bull and 3 Yorkies. And then one day they came home to a dead Yorkie and they thought it was a pit bull. Turns out it was the tiniest Yorkie. And when I walked in, they're like, do you know who killed the other one? And I said, yeah, it's the little one. And they're like, how did you know? I was like, because when I came in, she was at the front door barking at me while the other 2 dogs were behind her barking. And I'm like, I can tell she's the rule setter because she's in front of everybody. And they're like, yeah. They're like, we thought it was the pit bull. I'm like, of course you did, because you're judging the breed. But they went into the room. The pit bull was in a kennel, you know, completely fine. And then when they looked around, they saw the little Yorkie had blood on its face. And what happened was that it had bitten the other Yorkie on the jugular and just happened to puncture an artery, and it bled out. So, you know, it was how would you say, a well-positioned bite, but it was unfortunate because obviously it's their dog. We don't want to see that, you know. And the thing is that the dog had routinely corrected the other dogs to put them in their place, and then they're like, why did she kill this time? And I'm like, well, it sounds like she just did a firmer bite, but again, it happened to be on the right spot to kill the dog, you know. So once we're in this position, again, like it didn't matter. The solution is always the same: structure, discipline, consequence, rules. But I can tell you now, when I get these kinds of cases, let's go ahead.
She wants to lick herself. She obsessively keeps up with her dripping.
Sure, I would, because no, I'm gonna tell more on this too. We cannot go back to how things were. Okay, it's a very common thing that people get. They're like, Jesse, we just want to go back to what it was, and I go, it's not going to happen. Okay, because once we get dogs going after each other like this, unless like you see that to me here, like this energy, to me, looks like it's bothering her. Okay, now one thing dogs do is they can disagree with energy. Okay, because this is anxious energy for sure. Okay, in the dog world, this is unhealthy. Okay, so if dogs see and deem something unhealthy or like too neurotic, they'll take it out. Okay, so one thing that I noticed when you guys came in is she was anxious, but she calmed down fairly quickly. Now she's getting up. Yep. So you're gonna bring her back. There you go. But she ended up chilling out within about 2 to 3 minutes, if I remember correctly. But this one's still in an anxious state, right? That can cause something because it's restlessness. Going back to the fights, there's the puppies as a variable. The other thing that I heard a couple of times was a person entering.
Yeah,
right?
That's the newest development.
Yes.
The most recent fights are now when a person enters.
On the introduction, with the person entering, is the person high energy? No. No? They're neutral?
Yeah, in either case, so my son is low.
Real low.
Uh-huh.
The person today was chill also.
Okay. Were the dogs excited?
The dogs get excited.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they love our son. So he walks in. Our son's 6'4", but he sits on the floor right away to get down to the dog level.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to.
Did that happen? Do you know if that happened during the?
Second one today, no, he was standing the whole time.
Okay.
But you know,
Beatrice, you.
So that's also instability. So people see it, and they go, "Oh, my dog's happy to see you," right? Which they're not happy; they're excited, right? Is that excitement can very easily tip into aggression because the brain's erratic. Yes. So we always talk about a passive dog as a thinking dog. It takes more to build them up. Okay. So a couple things that I heard was, okay, the people are neutral, so that's good. So we know it's not the people, because sometimes the people are excited, the dogs are excited, and what happens is they're excited around each other, and then one bumps into the other, especially if there's already been tension, and they go, "You just bumped me, I don't like it, here we go." You see that? But people don't recognize that as bad because we look at it as, "Oh, they're happy to see you." Does that make sense?
Sure.
But for the dogs, especially if we've already had a couple of instances of conflict, and then they got 2 situations where the dogs were escalated. I know there was separation. That separation, going back to earlier when you asked about, is that resource guarding? I wouldn't dub it resource guarding, but dogs can resource guard people, okay? We have separation because there's a barrier, okay? At least in the one that I recall. We got the dog and a puppy greeting the person, right? So then I go, potentially maybe a little maternal stuff there, or she sees the energy, there's separation, now there's frustration.
That she's frustrated that she was separated, not included.
Correct. And it's not that she's frustrated that she's not included, she's just frustrated because of the energy and the separation. So dogs don't think like, "Oh, I'm missing out." Dogs don't think that way. It's the frustration of being away, because this was an unknown person that entered, correct?
Correct.
Are your dogs territorial in any way, or are they friendly with everybody? Okay. So
Other than on the street, if our daughter was here, she could describe on the walks. She's She's not
She's
going
not,
for,
not
not interested in meeting people. This one wants to meet everybody.
Okay, sure. So regardless, what we call this is barrier aggression or barrier frustration, because they can't get to the situation, but they're not frustrated because they're missing out. Does that make sense? So like there's a video on YouTube or on social media that went viral back in like 2020. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was two dogs with a electronic fence, and when it closes, they start fighting, and then when it opens, they stop fighting, and then it closes and they fight, and it opens and they stop fighting, right? And everybody, exactly, and everybody's like, why is this happening? And I go, because when the gate is closed, we have a barrier, they just turn on. Now we have a territorial aggression. You remove the barrier, they're now in one space, there is no barrier, they just stop. And it literally goes back and forth a few times. I saw a video just recently where there's a fence, a dog charges the fence, 3 dogs charge from the opposite side. One of the dogs jumps through the fence because it's the big bars, flips around and starts fighting back.
His two buddies?
Yes,
He's
right?
taking sides.
Yes, and to the person, you know, because you're like, what the hell, right? Like you're on the same team, you're in the same yard, but that's dog. It just flips and goes, the barrier is between us, even though we're friends, even though we might be even litter mates. Yeah. The barrier now separates them. Primitively, territorial behavior kicks in, and they happen to be on opposing sides. It doesn't matter, right? Like I get clients who are like, oh, my dog plays with my neighbor's dog all the time. But if they see each other outside in the yard, they fence fight, right? And I go, right, because they're friends outside the territories, but then when they're inside their own territories, they're like, this is our space, right? So it's the same thing there, where you got the one dog behind kind of creating a little bit of a territory. You have something that's causing stimulation or escalation, which is the guest, and then there's some form of frustration there, okay? The resource guarding incident, right, which was a more recent one.
The bone is the one that caused the puncture.
Yeah. And you said previously they had shared bones all the time. There wasn't an issue, correct? Right. So this is where once you have, in some cases, just that catalyst, that first fight, it's like lots of things start to become a problem. That's why I tell people, like, you're not going back to what it was before, where you could just not have to worry. In these cases, in my opinion, the only way to have them cohabitate is you're constantly on them. Okay, just giving direction and structure, avoidance, prevention. Even in cases where it's like you don't like, for me, I can predict things to a degree where I go, okay, if the dogs are having a problem here, I'm going to assume they're going to have a problem here. Does that make sense? And by knowing that, or just assuming, I either will avoid it or address it prior, so then I wouldn't see the problem. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Most people, exactly, most people don't do that. Questions so far?
So, just from what you're telling us, so big premise, not going back to the way things were.
Correct.
They theoretically could coexist in the house. When they're in a shared space, they're on their leashes, someone's on the other end. Can you do, let's say you're in a space, can you keep one in a crate and one free roaming?
Yes. So there's an answer here. There are answers. I tell everybody there's always a solution. It's just a matter of what you're willing to accept as a solution, right? I've seen this, especially since COVID. This has kind of gone up because during 2020, people didn't go anywhere. You know, they didn't really walk their dogs a whole lot. So it was just like frustration. So separation anxiety went to the roof, territorial behavior went to the roof, and dogs fighting at home went to the roof, okay, during 2020. Is when I get a case like this, you can do things like, you can have them, for example, loose, but I would put away anything that they would potentially fight over. Like you might say, like, oh, there's a sock. They never fight over the sock. Put it away. This is what I mentioned before. As I go, once I see something here, I'm going to just assume it's going to happen in other places too. And I do things like that to limit because you never know. One day she might just decide, like, I want to guard this sock, or she decides, I want to guard this sock, right? And then now you have another fight, but you're like, but they never fought over a sock before. I'm like, I know. But because there's unresolved tension, you just have to.
They found something.
Exactly. Okay. So I'm assuming before reaching out, you researched how we train the methods that we use.
I watched the videos.
Okay, so I do remote collar. Okay. Yes. Okay. Is this one?
I told Doug on some of them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to educate you guys.
Yeah.
Is this one you collar trained or no?
No, she not yet.
Okay.
So she does some hunting training, and almost everybody uses an e-collar.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we know if they're out 50 yards, I can't pull on the leash
Mm-hmm.
with a long check or whatever.
Yeah, yep.
I need to get some sort of a correction.
Yep.
You know, implement the e-collar.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And if I may interject something
Mhm.
to kind of maybe put another element to this picture. So in October, also what begins to happen, these two go to the dog park every morning.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, they're not going to the dog park.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that lack of free running? Now, we have a nice sized yard,
Mm-hmm.
But it's not.
but the variable, there was a change. There was no more dog park. I think you were concerned about the dog flu, you had your knee issue,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a combination of things.
Yep.
And it was a shared activity that they seemed to do fine at.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, the puppies were born at that point. We were still
You were running them to the dog park while I was home with the puppies.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
In my opinion, no.
okay.
So exercise doesn't. I come from Cesar Millan methodology. You guys familiar with Cesar Millan,
Yes.
right? Exercise, discipline, affection, and I'm a big believer in it. But the thing about Cesar Millan is what people don't pick up on is when he does exercise, discipline, affection. Discipline is actually tied into the exercise. He walks the dog as a pack, right? He makes the dog walk at his side. So it is exercise, but it's mixed with discipline. But people just see exercise. They just see walk your dog, right? So that's the one thing that's missing. So the dog park to me is not exercise, it's affection, right? And Caesar talks about this too. It's freedom.
Yeah.
It's go crazy if you want to go crazy, right? But crazy is what we don't want when we're trying to address aggression or tension. We always want passive. It's not to say that the dogs can't have fun and be escalated. But for example, I think today we have like 50 dogs in my daycare. You may have heard the occasional bark, but it's quiet, right?
Yeah.
Because it's structured. They can play, but they can only play to a 4. Because if they get to a 5, that's where scuffles happen. Does that make sense? We have reactive dogs here. We have human aggressive dogs here. We have anxious dogs. We have all that stuff, right? But it's quiet because of the structure. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Whereas most people in the home, the dogs, so you see again, right? And then the alert ears there. Dogs do what they want all the time. And maybe there's the occasional rule here and there. Does that make sense? So to get, yes.
I wonder if she needs to relieve herself, because that's something that hasn't happened.
She's really cleaning herself.
I know, but it,
Let me think here. Also, for example, my fiance and I got to get used to saying that. Yeah, so I'm going to pull her in. You're going to set her down using pressure on the butt. There you go. Her dog, she has a Great Pyrenees mix. I have a pit bull. Okay, my pit bull's 13 now, 60 pounds. Her Pyrenees is about 2 to 3 years old, about 70 pounds. Okay, they don't like each other. They do not like each other. Okay, but they tolerate each other because of me. Okay, I think in the 3 years that we've lived together, we've had 5 spats. One spat was the first spat was the worst. Her dog nicked my pit bull over the eye. No stitches or anything. It healed up. And in the other 2 to 3, it was because her mom was around. And her mom is very excited energy and unstructured energy. So when her mom's around, I always have to make sure that I'm watching everything because she creates this elevation and you can see where they're looking at each other and they don't like it. Okay. Her mom, my fiance's mom, also would love to watch all 3. We have 3 dogs. The Chihuahua he's the middleman. He don't bother anybody. And I always tell her no. And she's like, when are you going to trust me with all of your dogs? I'm like, never. Because you're an unstructured person. Right? You're a very loving person, but you're an affectionate person. But that's exactly why these two females could not be in your care at the same time. Does that make sense?
Sure.
The other times that we had, again, the 2 to 3 out of the 5 spats were when the mom was around. You see that?
They picked up on that energy.
Yes. Another time was when one was on the couch and the other was passing. Actually, two of the 5 were over the couch thing. So we already know that, right? So now I'm watching TV. If my pit is here laying next to me and I see Luna walking by, I check to see how does she feel, right? But I don't just assume that nothing's going to happen. I assume something's going to happen. And it's that alertness.
I think she needs to go out. She's telling me that.
Sure, you're welcome to, if you'd like to just bring her down, go up to the front.
I'm gonna put her in my coach.
Yeah, right there.
I know. I think I'm picking it up.
You're fine. Go up. Go up.
Yeah. So that anxious energy, and I'm not seeing hard stares,
Right.
but I am seeing attention.
And she's reading the room, kind of.
Yeah.
What is that and how?
Because,
to respond.
yeah, if you look at the space, like, what is there to be anxious about, right? And whether it's because she has to potty, whatever, the thing is, she doesn't know that.
Yeah.
She just sees anxious energy. Exactly. You know, the human, like, you know, she's like, oh, I think she's got to go potty, right? We as the human recognize that. The dog does not. Does this all make sense?
Yeah.
Questions so far?
I'm sorry.
Questions so far?
So down. Go on. Up. Down. Down. All the way. Down.
There you go.
Good. Good. So we can potentially reshape some of their responses to whether it's nervous energy or people entering the house and being greeted, whether that's that we have to keep them separate, separate greetings. They're already separate. They don't eat together. They're in separate rooms.
Mhm.
And she probably would finish first, but she never really, prior to this, she never really would go into the laundry room where Beatrice eats and go after her bowl.
Mhm.
So they're already fed separately, like I say. They sleep separately. Beatrice and the puppy are together, or in the same room,
Mhm.
in their own crates. She's in another room with my daughter. So there's already, and that was before any of this was going down. They were already separated. So I'm guessing we'll have to continue with that, and then try
To a degree, yeah.
and try to be more of your position and just looking for things or activities that could be provoking and trying to take those out of the picture before they're exposed.
Yeah, so it's either like you're like I said, avoiding or preventing, or being proactive about establishing control, right? So like when guests come over, I have an exercise for that, right? Of how to have guests come over correctly. So like I deal with like a lot of aggression, reactivity, territorial behavior. So like I always tell my clients, territorial behavior isn't unhealthy. It's healthy. It's not bad, it's healthy. It's unhealthy when you can't control it, right? Because if, let's say, for example, a bad guy entered the front door, that territorial behavior is going to be a good thing. But it's when the friend comes over and the dog exhibits the same behavior, because again, the dog doesn't differentiate. The dog just goes, I've seen you before, but I've never seen you just walk into the door before. That's suspicious. And they'll make a judgment call. I've had that happen a few times. And I'll tell the owner, like, it sucks, and I'm sorry that happened to your friend. But if that was a burglar, you would have a totally different feeling about the situation.
So if you have a set of controls you can put in place where you can say, not a burglar.
Yeah, exactly. The dog goes, okay, because you're the one deeming.
You're the alpha.
Exactly. You're establishing and communicating, this is my guest, nothing to be territorial over, right? So now we have something to help the dog distinguish. In the other cases, we need discipline, right? Your dogs are giving you a good example of discipline. What would that be?
I tell you what, if I had an absolute bulletproof recall for her, for instance, I would love that. So we go out and get the newspaper every morning, but if there's a squirrel across the street,
forget about it.
She's skipping over the paper and going for the squirrel.
Right.
She knows come, but
not to that level.
Yeah, and she says, "That's fine. I'll be there in a minute." Finish with the squirrel.
Yeah.
So she's making the decision, and I don't want that. She doesn't
Now,
she doesn't have a car coming or anything else.
This is an important thing to note. So I don't tie obedience with behavior a whole lot, but there's something that obedience allows us to do, right? And that is to put in consequence. Yeah. So here, think about it this way. If you can't make your dog recall, right? If you cannot make that happen, and then they get in the fight, how do you expect to make them stop fighting? Does that make sense?
It's just something else.
Correct.
Dix. It's probably just Beatrice. Yeah. Just Mom and Beatrice. Okay.
Let me text my staff, let them know they may have to lock the front door. So we were just talking about a couple of things, nothing too big. When it comes to trying to, I don't want to say resolve, but at least control the situation, is we need discipline and structure. Okay? So, yeah. So you see that lean in? Is that a sniff? So before it didn't look like a sniff. The sniff is coming in now. But you see the under eye look?
Yeah.
Right? Now there's a sniff. Now attention's diverted. To me, like, she's not hard staring. But the way that she's staring or looking, like, I feel like I see some kind of concern or I see something there. Okay? Your dogs are giving you a good example of discipline. Okay? What is that?
Oh, for just in general?
Do you know how dogs discipline each other?
Oh, yes. It's always with their mouths.
Their mouths, right?
Yeah,
They're physical.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So what needs to happen is you need to bite them back for the things you disagree with. Obviously, the fights, which we want to avoid the fights, but this is where things get tricky, okay? Is if dogs are in a fight, okay, human instinct is to pull them away. Even if you successfully pull them away, a lot of times, and your case isn't this bad, but I've had it where owners will take the dogs, to break them off, to put them in separate rooms, and then when they try to reintegrate later, they're right back at it again, and again, unresolved tension, right? So you have to, quote unquote, bite them to tell them you're not going to go into that fight. Does that make sense? Before. But if it's in the moment, the correct way, from my experience and opinion, is if two dogs are fighting, you have to make them surrender the fight. You have to make them decide to disengage. And this is the hardest part for people. No. Well, yes and no. Okay? Yes and no. I'm not saying, set up a dog fight. No. But
I get that.
Yeah, I know you're not saying that.
Yeah.
My anxiety, mine.
So the reason why with my guys, and you guys know, like, you watch this stuff, right? Cesar Millan?
No, I've never, I've seen a couple Cesar Millans years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When there was
that was his good stuff. That was his good stuff. If you watch his original stuff, that's the good stuff.
Okay.
His new stuff is kind of soft now.
Okay, so it was years ago when we had cable, and I think, maybe with our first sheepdog, I don't know.
Yeah, the Dog Whisperer show.
Yes.
That was back.
We no longer have cable.
So, what I mean by this is, for example, when Luna and Lexi got into a spat, right? Like the first one that ended up being a nick on her eye. I always do initially, hey, boom, to see if that'll startle them. And then I can intervene. But by the startle, I can then get them to surrender and decide to not fight, right? They decide to not fight. That's the difference.
I think it's their decision.
Correct. Is I came in and I gave my pit, Lex, a good firm pop, kick, boom, right here between the ribs and the butt. And she went, she jumped back and I go, boom, and I correct Luna. She jumps back and they go, what the hell just happened? And I sit there, right? And they're sitting there looking at me because now I'm the bigger threat. You see that?
Sure.
That's primal. That's dog. So because I did that on the first go, and we remember this is what us in 3 years, that was the worst of all of them. The rest, I can see them not liking each other, but they don't do anything because I still address it. Hey, okay, Dad, we're not going to fight because we know the first time we fought, you came in and you made us stop. That's the hard part for people, right? Because it does take a skill. And I'm not saying for you to do this, but I'm saying this is actually the way we would correctly disengage a fight, is you make the dogs decide to stop.
So that's your bite.
Correct. So I started training dogs 14 years ago. 12 years is canine perspective. The first 2 years, I taught using solely Cesar Millan methodology. And that's why I'm actually such a good trainer, because I don't need e-collar. I don't need prong collar. I am the correctional tool, just like your dog's teeth are the correctional tools. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And, the other thing that people don't think about is if a dog decides, I need to take you out, right? In order for us to have harmony, they will do so. So a dog will go to that extent. They go as far as needed to do what they would feel would resolve the problem. Does that make sense? So I think the same way. Okay, I'm not saying I kill dogs, but I think I need to go as far as I need to get the dog to go, hey, I'm done. I am good. Fine, you win. But because of that, the dog goes, I know when you're around, I cannot try anything. This is how I run a structured kennel with 50 dogs. Okay, these are extreme cases that I'm talking about. But because the humans are correcting the dogs and going, you can't play that rough, you can't mouth that hard, you can't whine, you can't bark, you can't this, you can't that, I can have 50 dogs here quietly. I'm sure maybe you heard the dogs barking either place. So we have 2 canine kennels next to us. They're when they're going, they're going. You can hear them from 2 blocks away. It's going. And people always walk in. They're like, it's crazy. They're like, you walk in here and quiet, and I can hear the dogs going all crazy next door. I go, yeah. So technically speaking, that's how we truly resolve a fight. But most people, 1, are not going to do that, or 2, don't know how to do it. Okay. So then that's where external tools come into play, like remote collar and all that stuff. Okay. So the first thing I do here is we have to teach the dogs to walk correctly, no pulling, which obviously is the heel command. Okay. I don't care about the obedience. I care about what heel allows me to do. Okay. May I take her?
Yes.
I care what the heel structure allows me to do. Okay. So e-collar is a miniaturized TENS unit. It's a muscle stimulator. Okay. Excuse me. I like to liken it as a bite on the button. Okay. So we always start with heel first because leash reactivity and leash pulling are the 2 most common things that we deal with. Okay. Heel fixes both of those things. So it's always the first thing that we teach. The other reason is most people, at least in the city of Chicago, walk their dogs 3 times a day, 7 days a week, right? So that's 3 times a day, 7 days a week. We get to practice this routine structure of heel, of control, of consequence, of discipline, right? Of I will give you permission when you can go and sniff and pee and poop and all that stuff, right? Whereas, because remember, most people, it's no structure ever. Dog jumps on the couch, dog jumps on the bed. Some dogs are free fed. Dogs jump on people. Dogs bark out the window. Remember, those are all decisions, right? And they're mundane decisions. Most people just excuse them. Your dog's going into conflict is a decision. Does that make sense? Sure. So now these little decisions end up becoming bigger decisions, and now we may potentially have a problem. Okay? So like leash reactivity, lunging and barking other dogs, other people, is a decision. right? So I told the owner, we have to start taking away decisions, start putting in consequence for decisions. And now the dog's going to think twice. Do I really want to do that? Is it worthwhile to do that? Because I know there might be a consequence. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So we do that with heel. And you might think like, but Jesse, the problem is fighting. I know the problem is fighting, right? But remember, that's the outcome of a problem. The fighting is not the problem. The fighting is a symptom of a problem. We have a dog that's incredibly anxious, unable to settle, right? We have potentially a dog here that does not like that anxious energy. We already have a catalyst for when they both got in a fight. Even though you're able to separate them, in my opinion, not correctly, right? Because they did not decide to disengage and then coexist. So that's the difference. And I forgot this. Correct. So for Luna and Lexi, when I disengaged that first fight, I did not separate them. I sat back down and went back to watching TV. And they sat there awkwardly going like, what do we do now? Okay. So here's an example, a life example. 20 years ago, when I was in high school, I got into a fight. Okay. And I went to a Catholic high school. Brother Roy came out. He was a big dude, separated us. He threw us in a room with each other. And he's like, you guys are going to sit here all day until you fix this, right? And it was awkward silence for Lord knows how long. At some point, he goes, the guy's name was Jose. He goes, I didn't think you were going to punch me back. And I was like, dude, I'm like, you fucking punch me first. That's self-defense, man. Like, my family's not going to be mad about me defending myself. We started talking. And then we actually resolved the tension that we had. And then afterwards, at the end of the day, Brother Roy came out. He's like, you guys going to fight again? We're like, no, we squashed it. And I always, once I became a dog trainer and learned all this stuff, like, man, you know, when I disengage dogs, when I make them disengage, even though I have to physically intervene, because unfortunately dogs cannot understand, hey guys, stop, this is unhealthy, right? You got to talk their language. But I let them sit with it. So the dogs go, okay, you made us decide to stop, and we had to sit we had to just be with each other, experience that awkward silence. Does that make sense? The difference is Luna and Lexi, again, don't like each other, but they tolerate each other. Does that make sense? Sure. So here, with the structure of heel, it's getting discipline into the brain, so they start seeing you as, you can also bite us. You can also disagree with things. And then we build on that. Okay. Then we can also go back to start doing activities with each other. If there's any way, if we're trying to get any way of like trying to get as closely back to what it was before, you have to create a singular unit. Otherwise, you have two units, right? You have one unit, two unit. It's two packs. Does that make sense? So when you start walking them together, this is like Cesar Millan stuff. When he has his pack, if he needs to integrate another dog, he walks them as a pack to exercise discipline, and then now they're doing an activity as a group. Does that make sense? So heel, you can walk more than one dog at one time. I think you commented on my video, right? Was that you? Yeah. So clearly you can walk more than one dog at one time.
He walks 8.
I used to walk 16. Yeah.
He's got 2, 4 and 4 here.
Yeah, that was back during 2020 because it was slower and we had the time and staff enough to just take all the dogs out. Yeah, I loved it. But yes, you being able to walk both your dogs, I can help you with. Okay, now we have ritual, now we have structure, consequence, and we have activity as a unit. Okay, there's that. The next thing is stationary control, right? Which is maybe you've heard of it, place command. We have a dog bed here, right? Yep. So stationary control, great for dogs like this, if they're anxious energy. This one seems to experience anxiety, but is able to relax because she's like sleeping with like facing the other way without a care in the world. This one obviously is still like this.
Right. If she was home, she'd be in that position. Yes, but
yeah.
She's in here, and no, you're right. In an environment beyond her place,
Mm-hmm.
she's anxious.
Sure. So here, you notice how she's calming down more? Mm-hmm. Do you know why that is? Why and why else? What am I doing differently? So earlier when you said she keeps checking her bottom,
yeah.
I didn't care. I want you to relax. Right now is not the time to check your bottom. You see that? Human excuses though, because dog needs to check their bottom. I understand, but they still can't do it. Gotcha. Right? But I'm not trying to be an asshole. Right. But when you're that strict, the dog goes, I submit. I see. Right? And I also technically bit her. I don't know if you saw, I gave her a little. Oh, yeah. Yes. And I said, don't worry about that right now. Yeah. So now I'm the bigger worry, not the bottom. Gotcha. Okay? That's dog. Yeah. But again, that's why I was like earlier, I was like, people don't see these things. But these little things that can remain unchecked lead to bigger things.
So that is why, would you say then, that is why when we say stop, sit, we're not getting anything?
Correct. There has to be consequence. So I was raised old school.
The word itself and the tone of voice is not going to...
Not till you bite them.
Gotcha.
Right? So I was raised old school. I was spanked. My mom would just tell me wash the dishes once. Right? Or there was, I'm not going to tell you again. Right? Can we relate a little bit?
Yeah,
so
2 steps in there.
Exactly. I've in 37 years of my life spoken back to my mom one time. Okay? I remember the first time, this was when I was a teenager, you know. Yeah. I said something under my breath and she said, "What did you say?" And I go, "Nothing." And she goes, "Pop." Right? And I love my mom. I respect my mom very much. I love her dearly. I credit my mother a lot to my success as a trainer because of that discipline, that black and whiteness. Yeah. You know, dogs thrive in that black and whiteness. We don't have gray area here. I don't care why you're anxious. You're not going to be anxious. I don't care why you're barking. You're not going to bark. You see? Again, not trying to be mean, but we have 50 dogs here. During the holiday, we had 70 dogs here.
So you can't go barking.
No bark. Right? So because I'm that strict in black and white with them, they go, "Okay, Jesse, we know the rules." And that's why a lot of dogs that come here, we get dogs that can only come here. We get dogs that have been kicked out of other places, and they come here and they do great. You know, and the owner, like we get clients that come from St. Charles, Elmhurst, Hoffman Estates, Skokie. They drive all the way over here.
Because that's where their dog can.
Yes. Okay. And this is just me with your dog a couple of minutes. Right? So again, I don't need the tool of e-collar and all that stuff because I have 14 years of experience. I come from Cesar Millan methodology, leash dog energy, right? It's the owner. You know, I work with sometimes 10 dogs a day. Earlier in my career, it was like God knows how many dogs in a week. But that's why my skill set was so quickly developed, right? Most people, you just deal with what you have. So your window of experience is going to be limited. So the remote collar allows me to bite the dog at the press of a button and go, "Here you go. Press this, have it at this number, press this button to stop the behavior." And whether you press it, you press it, I press it. It's the same. Does that make sense? So the reason why I don't do prong collar as much anymore, I'm not against prong collar. Prong collar takes a lot of technical skill. Okay, it's a great tool, but a lot of technical skill. So like for example, one of the most common things we get is the owner will go to correct the dog, but they tend to have a mental hump because they don't like the fact that they feel like they're hurting their dog. Remote collar creates a disconnect because you press a button, it does the work, right? The other thing is, in some cases, you know, you could give the dog a correction, but you don't have the skill of correcting correctly, right? Or maybe you don't have the level of strength to put behind that correction to actually get your point across. Does that make sense? So, and then there's also gauging how firm do I need to correct my dog for this particular moment. Like there's all these things that gets complicated. Remote collar, we don't have that. It's just press the button, add a setting. As long as it's the correct setting, we're going to get what we're looking for. Okay. The main thing that we see hold people back is they operate too low on the collar. Okay. So like I've had there's a case I talked about from 2023. It was my worst reactivity case of the year. It was about a 25-ish pound dog who needed a collar for a 70-pound dog and over. Okay. I recognized the dog's reactivity to be through the roof. And I told the owner, you don't want to get the lower powered because there's different tiers. There's some for 15-pound dogs, some for 35-pound and under dogs, 70-pound and under, 70-pound and over, right? There's tiered. I go, you want the high-powered one. And she's like, okay, Jesse. She went, she bought it. She didn't question me. A lot of people question me, but like, what do you mean? The dog's only 25 pounds. I understand that, but trust me, right? So it took me up to the 4th class before we finally squashed the reactivity, and we had to max out the collar, right? We always start low and we work our way up until we find the answer. And I was like, trust me. I was like, this is an extreme case. And we tried everything already under this. Do this, rinse and repeat for the next 2 weeks. If it doesn't work, email me. If it does work, email me. We have the next class. Okay. Eventually, we got there and we scheduled the 4th class. And we are at Oz Park, which is the busiest park in Chicago. Complete 180. As calm as can be. The first class was hell. The dog was barking at everyone and everything, right? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I can actually walk her now. And I said, good for you for doing the work, because again, logic says, why do I need a collar mitt for a Rottweiler? And why do I need to correct my dog this high? I go, because everything else wasn't working. Okay, every case is different. The saying, it's not about the dog in the fight, but the fight in the dog. You guys ever heard that?
Yep.
Yep. It's 100% true. Like, that dog was a great example. Most of the time when I get dogs that need that level of consequence, they're like power breeds, pit bulls, German shepherds, stuff like that. And then this little 25-pounder comes up and goes, here you go. And I'm like, wow, okay. So if as we're working, something happens, right? And you're like, yeah, Jesse, you know, she went to full-blown attack mode. I started using the collar. And then I couldn't get them to stop. I just put them in a different room, okay? I would go, where did you stop? And you might say 40. I'm like, you have 87 more levels to go. Why did you stop at 40? I didn't want to make it worse. You know, the dog, it was so crazy, this and that. I go, right, but now you lost opportunity. Because the dog goes, you did try to stop me, but then you gave up.
So I waited.
Yes. And that reinforces. Now the next time is harder.
Right, so they want.
Yes. So for me, the first time the dog gives me the opportunity, you know, first impressions, there's been times where I've taken 45 minutes to get the first time done, you know, and the owner's like, well, that was a waste of time. I'm like, no, it wasn't, because now the dog's just learned we won't give up, and they're not going to get their way. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And that's a part of, how do you say, the stuff that I teach. It's not just, this isn't just like, oh, training. I'm teaching you like how do dogs live with each other, how they establish harmony, how you're going to establish harmony, what you need to do, right? You don't need to be a jerk to your dogs, but you do need to be consistent. You do need to follow through, right? You do need to go there if you need to go there, which is why I tell people I can only take you as far as you're willing to go, you know, because I'll get it done. But it doesn't matter if I can get it done. You got to get it done, right? I can run a kennel with 50 dogs and it's quiet. You got to be able to run your own kennel with 2 dogs. You see that? Question on any of that stuff?
Okay, so e-collars, heel.
So yes, so how this would look. Yes, we always start with heel. Yep.
Yeah, so backpedal.
Mm-hmm.
Positive food enforcement?
No.
Why would you choose not to?
Because food tends to stimulate the mind, right?
And
we don't want to escalate. We want to de-escalate.
okay.
Right?
But
and dogs, in my opinion, like, I wouldn't stop a fight and go, good job, here you go. Right? It's just, you just stop the fight. So growing up, my mom didn't say, hey, Jesse, did you break any windows? And I said, no, Mom. She goes, great, here's a piece of carrot cake.
Right.
You just don't do it.
okay.
Right? And if I got out of line, there was just consequence. Right? With dogs, we can reward for obedience. Sit, stay, come. I don't have a problem with it. I tend not to, because it tends to be too much for the average dog owner. Remember, I'm a dog trainer. I can absolutely do all these things. But you got your leash, you got your dog, in some cases 2 dogs, you got your food, you got your timing, right? You got all these things. You don't really want to have to worry about that. Now, what we've done in the past for the owners that would like to use food is I go, first we start remote collar, dog leash, get the training, like the concepts in. Once you got that down, now we can pair in the food, because you already have one skill set down, as opposed to trying to do multiple skill sets at one time when you're trying to learn one. Does that make sense?
They won't know unless you've corrected them what they're being rewarded for, right? I mean, is that...
No, you can, like, let's say you said sit and they sat and you rewarded them.
Yeah.
Like, they tie, like, oh, I put my butt down, I get food.
Yes.
Right? But what happens if they get up?
Yeah, right. I mean, ideally, you'd like that sit to be...
Yeah.
It's concrete.
How do you hold that sit?
Right.
You get another command.
Right.
You sit until further...
Like, right now, what I wanted your dog to do was to be calm. Did I achieve it?
Yes.
Right? Did I give her food? No. I just told her what she couldn't do. So...
And so would you, pardon me for interrupting.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if Doug puts Dixie in a sit, and she's sitting, but he walks 10 feet up and she makes a move,
Consequence.
e-collar.
You don't move, correct. And that's all through conditioning, and we can shape all that stuff.
So in other words, the expectation that if he's giving her a sit, that she's going to actually hold it until he turns and says, come.
She'll hold it for 30 minutes.
But without a consequence, she's not going to
Correct.
sit. She's going to do what she'd like to do.
Correct. So positive reinforcement is a great tool for things you want to see again. Okay, it's not a great tool for things you don't want to see again.
Gotcha.
Right, that's what consequence is for.
Right.
Do you want to see a fight?
Yeah,
No, that's where consequence comes in, right? You fight consequence. We don't reward for the stop.
Run across the street, so we have more issues than just the fight. We have dogs that, squirrels, we have a big oak tree, so we call it.
Yeah. So recall, not a problem. Also, your dog not bolting in the first place, also not a problem. Because those are two different things.
Yeah, she'll
Right.
bolt when she sees someone coming down the street. She's so excited, wants to meet them, and that scares the person.
Right. So most people would think recall would fix that problem,
And it doesn't.
right? And I go, well, if you have reliable recall, right? Let's say your dogs did listen, but I don't want the dog to take off in the first place.
Yes, right.
Like I didn't just go,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't go out to my friend's house without permission. Mom, can I go to John's? No. Mom, can I go to John's? You do your homework? Yes. Yes, you can. You see the difference? So people look at they go, I have these problem behaviors and I need the obedience in these cases. I go, right. The difference is my dogs don't take off, period. But when I go to the park and I say, free dog, break, chase squirrels, have fun, 30 minutes in, we're done, get over here. Right? That's where the obedience comes in now, because I had given them permission to do something. And they're dogs, and sometimes shit happens, and they might make a bad decision, right? But then obedience could come in, or I give them a correction, and I go, you weren't supposed to do that in the first place. Right? So the reason why I don't do warnings, and I don't say no or anything, I just go straight to consequence, is because that's what dogs do a lot of times.
There's no warning.
Yeah, there's no warning. It's just boom. Right? Like there's stuff that you brought up, they were like, it was just fight. Right? There was no conversation. Hey, you're making me upset. Oh, I don't care. I'm not touching you. Oh, here we go. Right? Like it was just fight.
And I envisioned, though, Jesse, and maybe you can inform us, I was trying to envision before the onset of a fight, and we're talking seconds, someone between them must have given a signal.
Yes.
Like,
In my
and the
opinion,
other didn't adhere. And
we
then-
got to resolve it. Right.
Okay.
Someone's got to win.
Okay.
Right? So so most people are warnings. No, no, sit, right? And now that also creates energy. She's noticed that, right? Like what's going on over here, right? So now you're obviously feeding in as well.
Because your energy's risen,
Mm-hmm.
and that rises there.
So like, have you ever with the puppy where you try to get stern with them and they'll growl at you? You ever seen that? Right? Because your energy is rising. So they're like, hey, like who are you to bring that energy to me? And that's with the puppy. Right? Puppies start to recognize this stuff, I think 3 to 4 weeks-ish.
Yeah, our puppies, when there was growling early, and I
Yeah.
was nervous, like, are you going to become aggressive?
No. That's for them. They're establishing harmony, but it's how the human perceives things, right? So, because dogs would bite their puppies that young, and what happens a lot of times is when people adopt the puppies out at 2 months, the adopting family is not correcting the puppy. They're excusing it as puppy behavior, barking, jumping, being crazy, the zoomies, all that stuff. And then they become a 1 to 2 year old dog with these problems because nobody ever checked them. When we get puppies at 2 months, we correct them like any other dog would, using the same methodology. I go, you're not going to do that. You're not going to bark in your kennel, right? You're not going to just jump on me when I walk in to pick up your potty or whatever. Like, I'm going to correct you. And that's why our puppies are calm and healthy, because we're giving them discipline like any other dog would from the get-go, whereas people are ignoring or excusing things, and it goes unchecked. Now the ego grows, or the puppy develops behavioral issues, and then later on we're trying to retroactively correct something that's been happening for a year, 2 years, So the way I would foresee this playing out for you guys, and this is just for what I know, we have to do HEAL, which is typically 2 classes, part 1 and part 2. We see how things are playing out. The third class might be how do we heal our dogs together, so we're not doubling up our work, right? So then that's potentially class 3. Stationary control. When we do place command, it's indefinite. An hour, 20 minutes, 4 hours, you pick and choose, okay? This can technically also be used when guests come over,
Right.
okay?
Yeah.
A class on how do we correctly have guests enter the home? Okay, that's a separate thing. Those are two different things. Recall. So now we're at 6. Correcting how to correct behaviors. And I'm not talking about the fight. We'll talk about that. But whether a dog is to be corrected for jumping, counter surfing, resource guarding, or whatever, it's the same thing. Bite, bite, bite. Right? If growing up, if I didn't do my homework, if I talk back to my mom, or if I stay past my curfew, spank, spank, spank. It was one consequence for a multitude of behaviors. Does that make sense? Dogs are the same way, right? They just use that bite response as don't do that.
So to counter serve, you're giving that poke.
You could, or you could do it with the collar.
Okay.
I will teach you how to, I will give you multiple ways of correcting. E-collar is a big part of the program for sure, but you're not going to have your collars on 24/7, right? So I have to educate you on when I would advise having the collars on, when your dogs would have breaks from the collars. Probably have to put up a couple of, like, make rules there. So like if a guest was coming over and it's like, oh, it's a time that the dogs absolutely need collars on, but for whatever reason, maybe one is charging because it died, and you're like, well, we don't have it. We'd probably do some kind of prevention there, right? Just to avoid the situation. So I'm giving you a number of answers because not one answer always works all the time. Okay. And essentially teaching you how do you run your own little private, in-home quiet kennel with structure. Okay. The biggest thing here is we're trying to prevent another fight from happening. Yeah. Okay. Now, it typically comes up, but sometimes clients like Jesse, let's say somebody makes a mistake. They open the door and the dog's in the room and the dog gets out, and then we have a fight and we weren't expecting it because we were doing this. What do we do? I can also inform you. Unfortunately, we can't just create the situation, but I can inform you so at least you have an understanding, so that should the moment arise, bless you, you can act appropriately, as opposed to just acting in response to like, oh my God, panic, because that just shows the dogs like you don't know what you're doing. Okay.
I scream at a really high pitch.
Yeah, I mean it's startling.
It's
I'm
a jumpy person to begin with, like
Sure.
I'm a nervous sector. If someone walks in, I get startled.
Sure.
But when that happens, I'm off my pens. I'm wrong.
Sure. So my job is to show you success. When you start seeing these things working, from what I've seen in the past, the owners their stress levels start to come down because you're seeing like, oh, like he knows what he's talking about. Like these things are working. You start to become more confident. Okay. So, and I try to prevent things just because nothing's perfect. Someone's going to make a mistake. And which actually is a good point to bring up because it's a lot of times it's in these cases where when people go, hey, things are going so good, right? Is complacency. Yeah. And then somebody makes a mistake and then we got dogfight. Okay. So we had 2 dogs that just boarded with us recently, Gordo and Bay. Gordo came to me first with human issues. He was a nervous dog. He was lunging at people, trying to go after people entering the home. He was easy peasy. Okay. We got that resolved, no problem. Then they adopted or foster fail, whatever, Bay, who was a 6-month-old pit bull puppy. Okay, he's actually the worst of the 2, and has attacked Gordo multiple times over food. He's like an extreme resource guarder. And then I worked with them with Bay. We had harmony. We put rules, preventional things, all that stuff. One day she came home from work. Husband was out, and she saw a toy in the ground, and she goes, "I should put that away." Oh, but now the dog's been fine. Worst dog fight that they had until that time.
That moment of complacency.
Exactly. Whereas I go, nope, you're going away. You see that? And it happens here too.
Sure.
Like it's inevitable.
Because it's our humanness.
Yes.
We're tired. So there's all these other variables that are going on for us when we're choosing complacency. We're exhausted. There's other things. We're anticipating something else. I'm just too tired right now. I had a headache.
Sure. I'll give you a personal example. For me, my business is doing well. I'm not rich by any means, but I have employees that are paid. I'm paid, my dogs are happy, my clients are happy, I became complacent. Then my fiance got pregnant. And boy, is that a kick in the ass. Now I'm like, okay. And I've been on go. Okay. When we were in Florida, I didn't want to be in Florida. I'm like, I should be working. We got a baby coming, you know? It knocked me out of that complacency. But I'm like, oh, great. Now my business is going to go to new heights because I have this thing driving me now, you know?
You got a fire.
Yeah. So, but at some point, I might become complacent in the future once the child is born. You know, again, tired. Baby's an infant, not letting you sleep. Yeah, I know. I'm aware. A lot of my clients have had kids, and they're like, Jesse, I haven't sleep in 2 days, you know? So, but yeah, it's inevitable, right? So that's just one thing to keep in mind is, again, my dogs, they're not perfect, but they keep themselves in check because of me and because I'm still on them, right?
It's accepted they will always dislike each other and you're always going to be on. You're not going to be fooled into thinking, well, now they get along. They're okay.
Is there anybody in your life that you don't like?
Yes.
Yeah. Right? And like nothing could make you like that person except that person. Maybe one day they change that thing you don't like about them. And you go, you know what? So-and-so really, you know, changed for the better. They're, you know, a pleasure to be around now. But that's because they changed and you're making a response to that change. Dogs don't do that. Dixie won't wake up one day and go, you know what? Or Beatrice won't wake up one day and go, you know what? We've caused our parents enough stress. We're going to change our ways.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing for my dogs. Like nothing can make you like something but you. Like I didn't used to like sushi 10 years ago. I love sushi now because a friend of mine brought me to a place. He introduced, he's like, this is delicious. It's cooked. It's not raw fish. Because I was like, gross raw fish, right? And I tried it. Oh, this is great. And then from experiencing that, I'm like, wow, this is really good. Then I tried this and I tried that and I tried this. And I tried nigiri, poke, sashimi, uni. I love it all, right? But that experience is what changed my mind. And for dogs, unfortunately, we don't have that. You cannot make them like something. Okay? Which is also why a lot of times we just can't go backwards. Okay? We're here and it is what it is. Other questions?
I don't think so. So a series of 6 classes, say the approximate cost on that?
So 6. So it's all online. We don't do per dog. So you're not paying a program for one dog, a program for another dog. Okay. What I do is, you know, you've invested your money into training. I show up and I go, I'm here. What do you want to do? Okay. So sometimes I had one client I had to train 4 dogs. We do recommend in the beginning, at least the first couple classes, as we extend the class by half an hour. I believe the fee off the top of my head is $100. So you extend the first 2 classes in half an hour. So you got 45 minutes, 45 minutes. Typically, once we get the first 2 classes down, every other class we can get stuff done within within an hour. Okay. So I know 6 classes off the top of my head is around $1475-ish. Plus you have the 100 for 2 classes, that's $216.75-ish. And then you have the cost of your training tools. Okay. Now, if you dig it, so we have 3, 6, 9, and 12-week programs. 3 is the shortest. 3 is for I want to walk my dog, leash reactivity type stuff. Very simple. 6 classes is walk my dog, recall. 9 classes is walk my dog, recall. Go to restaurants, have my dog be stationary. 12 classes is I want a fully off-leash trained dog. Okay, so how this pertains in your particular case is we have behavior involved, right? Is you're still doing obedience classes, but we also cover behavior. Okay, so if you did like a 9-class course, you may not get as far as a person whose dog doesn't have behavior issues because some of those classes are going to be used to address behavior. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I'll give you a general way that I see this progressing and then what we could get done in each program length, okay? So you'd be at least, at a minimum, 6. I would probably say or suggest 9, if not 12, okay? If you did 6, remember we have 2 classes on heel. That has to happen. That sets the foundation for everything. So you understand the collar, you start to learn your dog's settings and everything, what number is appropriate to your dog, and get an understanding of how structure works, okay? The 3rd class most likely stationary control, because this will allow you to have the dogs coexist within the space and not always have to be separated, but they will be under control, okay? A class on how do we correct behavior. That's class 4, okay? Whether they're counter surfing or barking or whatever, how do we correct behavior? And here are other methods to correct behavior when you don't have your e-collar on, okay? 5 and 6, I'd probably treat as a variable, okay? Once you get that far and you might go, you know what, Jesse, we feel like really good about this. These little things are helping us out a lot. We'd like to do recall. I can do recall, okay? Because we can't just go, all right, let's start a fight, right? Yeah, we can't do that. So with the shorter program, what I'm doing is what I call I bare bones it. I'm going to teach you stuff that I know you need to have, and then we play it by ear. So then maybe you're like, you know what, Jess, we had the dogs together and we noticed this. Sometimes we have a class and it's just talking because like right now, like when I kept pointing out how she kept looking at her when she kept moving. Since I've taken control of her, she's been more at ease. I don't know if you noticed that. Okay. That stuff, the stuff that you're not aware of, right? So it's usually a lot of talking unless we happen to see it real time. And then I can, like this, show you.
Teach us to be observers.
Exactly. How to be proactive and not reactive, okay? So like, you know, if I had a dog that I knew was a resource guarder, and I wouldn't do this, but let's say, for example, they were eating, and my dog started to walk behind them just as passing by, my attention already goes here, because I know that dog's a resource guarder. So I can already be a step ahead in case something triggers, right?
How would you respond to that?
What do you mean?
So you know you've got a resource guarder in his head.
Yeah, I would stop the dog walking by.
Gotcha.
I would correct that dog.
Gotcha.
Right? So I'm not the type to go, okay, resource guarder, here's another dog, deal with it.
Oh, okay.
That's actually not correct. That's just asking for a problem, right? So like if you're eating your food, do you want somebody looming over you, right? Do you want somebody constantly walking by you, right? You're like, I just want to enjoy my meal, leave me alone, right? So I want coexistence. That's always the bare minimum.
Can you desensitize the resource guarder somewhat so that it you know, if
Eyes opened, but still resting state.
let's say the resource guarder is eating over there and the intruder is, you know, this far away and the head comes up to look but then goes back to eating, and then it gets to say, you know, 5 feet away, and now the head is down, but starting with a growl maybe. And can you desensitize the resource guarder somewhat so that it isn't as, I know it's not the right, reactive to the, knowing it's going to be able to finish its meal.
Yes.
No one's taking
It's a yes and no answer. So I would proactively address the other dog.
Yeah.
Right? Because I want to prevent the problem from happening. So as opposed, you could technically, theoretically, correct the dog for guarding while it's eating, right? But
Specific to that.
right.
That's fine.
No, so I am able to make things happen that the average person cannot. I know I don't teach the average person to do so because complacency, or they make a bad judgment, and then something happens, right? So for example, one of the first dogs that I trained when I came back when I was trying to build my business was a dog reactive dog, and she was highly ball driven, like a working dog. So she would do anything for the ball. And if another dog came near that ball, it was getting attacked 100%. So I remember I was in Deerfield at the time at my stepdad's place. I had her in the yard. I brought out my dogs. At the time I had 3. So those 4 dogs running around. And I threw the ball and she goes, right? And all my dogs go. And I just see her look and just go after my pit. And I corrected it. Nothing happened. After that day, she would play ball with my dogs, no problem. If she saw them pick up the ball, she would just surrender it. Okay, if she picked up the ball and they were chasing her, she would just run and allow them to chase her. When I found her at home, because this was for a rescue, I told them, because I made a video on it, and I told them, I'm capable of this. You are not capable of this. I set that tone and that boundary with them right away. And they're like, what do you mean? We thought you trained her. I'm like, I did train her. And she can do that with me.
Yeah.
With me.
You're the alpha.
Exactly.
She needs an alpha to interfere.
I'm not going to have you do that, because the person goes, this dog is trained, takes them to a dog park, throws the ball, dog fight.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because they don't know. They just think the dog is fixed.
So
The dog is not fixed.
So you taught them, don't get in that situation.
Correct.
Don't throw the ball.
Yes. Even though you saw it, you saw me do it, you're not going to do
You're
it.
not going to do it.
Yeah. Correct. Now, if that person was a dog trainer and a dog trainer that wanted to get into behavior and educate themselves and stuff, I go, maybe you can do it. Maybe you can do it, right? Because again, it's that assertiveness, it's that dominance, alpha type. Like I'm setting the boundary, I will reinforce type stuff. Even if a trainer took that dog and didn't do consequence and stuff, I guarantee that dog regresses.
Just a quick step back to
Mm-hmm.
place. So we could have two places, and I don't want to get into specifics right now, but would it be Beatrice Place,
Mm-hmm.
or do they have different names? Is one spot and the other one is?
You could do
place?
different. Yep, you could do different names. You can also do name recognition, where it's like Beatrice Place, Dixie Place. That requires more training because dogs tend to hear the first word and then they tend to just assume things. So then you might find you say place and they both go to place.
I just
Right.
want to end up in the same place. I kinda-
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So that's stuff that we
Okay.
would have to train potentially, right?
Specific. Okay.
Yeah, and we can make certain objects, like for her, you can't go to that one. You always go to that one, and vice versa. That would be
When you say
preventional.
Purple, you red, and they know to go. at that
Correct.
time.
Yeah, and it's not complicated. Remote collar makes things a lot easier. Everything, of course, does take work. One thing to bear in mind is, of course, we are going into the winter. Snow is upon us.
Yeah.
So the heel stuff, even though we could do it inside because I have my facility here, you would still have to do it outside.
Practice it outside.
Exactly. Okay, because remember, it's a daily ritual. Place gives you structure within the home. So that's me bare bonesing it.
Yeah.
If we did 9, we can cover more ground, and time is what allows things to happen. So a lot of my clients, what they do is, we might buy a longer program like 9 or 12. At some point, either if we're doing behavioral obedience, we'll go, let's say on class 7, you have everything theoretically that you need, but you need to go off and practice and implement and screw up, right? And then you give me a call. Hopefully it's not over a fight, but you're like, hey, Jesse, we managed to avoid a spat, but this happened. We need a lesson. I go, great. Now we got something to work on, okay? Otherwise, if everything is going well, and it's like, we got a few classes left over, I can show you how to advance your training to an off-leash level. All commands can be taught to off-leash. Sit, stay, down, come, place, heel. Okay. The only one that really matters is recall. And, a recall that's not off-leash reliable is pointless. But all commands can be taught to an off-leash level. Okay. And you pick and choose. You pick and choose. You tell me what you want to accomplish, and I'll tell you whether or not if it's feasible. Okay. Heel and recall are usually the big two that people like to get to an off-leash level, because they usually take their dogs to like open dog parks or the dog beach, and it's just nice to recall your dog and heel them as you're exiting without always having to leash them up, and it looks nice. That for sure.
Shows off to the
It
others.
shows off, yeah.
Look at my dog.
So like 9 classes, like that would get us that much. And then 12 is like, we want these dogs, we want as much control over these dogs as possible. Plus we have a lot of time to work on things if they pop up.
Now we're doing AKC obedience, right? Walk away, because I've seen them do. They make them sit or whatever, and they walk away. They're behind a curtain and stuff. The dogs,
Yeah, out of sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
No, you can get as much as you want depending on how much work you're willing to invest.
Yeah.
As with all things.
So we understand that. We do have this puppy that we're not certain if it's ready to be rehomed. So it was returned to us for fear aggression. That's what the vet wrote. I've seen your videos. You delineate fear, nervous, anxious. I'm going to say probably he's more nervous. He doesn't.
It's from her litter, right?
Yes. And he showed those signs at 5 weeks when the handlers came and were handling him. And then at 6 weeks when we took him to the vet, he was the squealer upon, like no one even touched him yet.
Not our vet.
When we took him to the vet, 6 weeks, remember? They were putting puppies up on the table.
On the scale. Yeah. Okay.
Everybody's getting the shot, dewormed, and squealing. The doctor didn't even touch yet.
Sounds like fear to me.
So anyhow, high sensitivity, we made the mistake. We sent him off to a home with children. Nope. He had the zoomies. The owner tried to grab him to come in. He got bit. So he came back to us. We've been working with, what would you say, positive reinforcement and food?
Yes.
And desensitizing.
Yeah, kind of. So, right, kind of teaching him if he's going to be picked up by strangers and even passed around to other people, he's not going to die.
Yeah.
So, trying to alleviate some of that fear.
Sure.
And,
we just
went to Home Depot, and had some of the staff there, throwing him kibble, not reaching out their hand, which people kind of instinctively want to do. But again, a little bit of the you won't die from strangers. But he may be a separate issue.
Right, but I just want to ask Jesse, do we bring him in for an evaluation to see if he's ready to be rehomed?
Oh, so the problem you're going to have with that dog is all the work is tied to you.
Right, so now he's going to have to get a new pack leader.
Who's willing to take on the package, the emotional baggage, if you will, right? And either one, learn to live with it, two, be proactive about addressing the problem, right? Now, let's say...
Because he's 20 weeks old now. I watched your videos. You're talking about a 6-month change, a 1-year change.
And a 2-year change. Oh, you're a good student. I like you. Yes, that is correct.
She did.
Yeah.
I
Don't think the dog will get better.
Encourage her.
So when we get dogs with behavioral issues, unless you're proactive about addressing them, you're either going to get worse or stay static.
right, so if we turn him to a home and explain, but they don't do
they would have to likely, unless they can become pack leader, they would likely have to take him to someone and kind of retrain with them now
Correct.
as alpha.
Yeah, they're having to take on that responsibility and go like, yes, we will work with this dog, and that's what makes it difficult. Because I've helped rehome aggressive dogs, anxious dogs, and all that stuff, and people in the beginning say, oh my, they feel poor, they feel not poor, they feel sad, and they take it out of guilt, and later on they're like, yeah, this is bigger than we thought, right?
It's coming back, right?
Yeah, so that's why for Frankie, I told a few people no, because she was a beautiful dog. She's if you go to my YouTube channel and you sort it by age, it's one of the first 2 to 3 videos I put up. Oh,
I can't find Lake. You told us to go look for Lake. I can't find Lake video.
oh really?
Yeah. But anyhow, that's his
I'll see if I'll pull it up. I'll send it to you so you can see. So Frankie, she's a beautiful dog. She looks like a silver pipple with leopard spots. Okay, and she had like these very light blue eyes. So finding her someone wasn't going to be a problem. Finding her the right person was going to be the problem. And I took her to a lot of people, and I was like, and then the rescue would say, "What do you think?" I go, no. They're like, "Jesse, you're saying no? I'll fucking lie." And I go, "I understand, but it's better to say no than to give the dog up."
Yeah.
They screw up the dog,
and then it goes back.
come back, and now I got to do more work, right? And I'm fine to do the work, but at the same time, like, I'm very much like, just the easiest path isn't always the right path. So it was no, and eventually we found the right family. They weren't going to have another dog. They understood the rules. When I told them she can't play ball, they're like, "We get it, we understand." They followed. They bought their own e-collar. They used to come. I used to have group classes at the time. They were very responsible, and she has been with them since. Okay. Right.
So it took a while.
Yes. The problem, however, with fear, aggression, and what you've told me is that the dog or puppy is willing to go towards its own handler. That makes it also difficult.
Right. So when you tried to put the collar on, he would try and...
He hasn't like made me bleed, but broke skin, and so he'll nip because I'll go in and I want.
He doesn't want the collar.
Right. When the problem.
And he's coming, and I have a slip leash, and I need to slip it, and as soon as he sees the slip, he wants to run away.
Yeah, that's fear for sure. Yeah.
But he decides most of the time he's coming, and most of the time he sits down for the slip and he gets his treat, and we go in. Because our backyard, we have to walk 20-some feet to the door. No one can be without a leash.
Sure.
Because that's the driveway.
Yeah, I got you.
Street. And he was choosing not to. That's not a choice. We're going in because I got others. And that's when he went for it.
Yeah, that's where you're going to struggle with. It's easier to rehome a dog that's aggressive when it's external. right? The dog goes after other people, my guest or whatever. Because then I'll just crate my dog. Oh, I'll just put my dog in a room, right? Or, you know, it's not to them. When you're like, yeah, this dog has fear aggression and he'll bite you, right? Like when you try to collar him, they're gonna be like, well, why do I want a dog like that? Yeah, that's what you're gonna struggle with.
Like this morning I was holding him back, holding him. These two were working on something, and he just got tired of being held, and he turns and he wants.
Yeah.
And he's also, as he does it, he's afraid and he wants to pull off. So he
knows
feels bad. It's like he knows it's wrong, but he doesn't.
No, it's not that. This is a common thing that I get. So he's not proactively thinking this. Dogs are reactionary. They're not proactive. Okay, humans are proactive. You could decide one day, I want to learn how to play guitar. Go on Google, find a guitar teacher, hire the teacher. Like that's all proactive. But we're also reactive, right? Someone calls you a name. The hell you just call me, right? That's also reactive. Dogs are only reactive. So what happens is you press a threshold. He goes under stress. He reacts out of fear or whatever. But fear is a weak energy. So after the confrontation, the dog starts shaking or whatever. What looks guilty is them going like, I'm not built to do this. It's like with people. Some people are built for confrontation. That's why not everybody's a cop. You have to be a certain personality type to be a cop, right? To join the army, you have to be a certain personality type because you're putting your life on the line, right? Not everybody is built for that. Same thing for dogs. Not all dogs are built for confrontation. So when they are forced into confrontation, even though in that case you weren't doing anything forcefully, it pushed the dog into that situation. It had to do what it needed to do, but then was like, That's why, like,
Like the energy that
exactly. And that the fact that it had to go into confrontation. So, like, there's videos, for example, of like someone that had to like shoot someone in self-defense, and they're interviewing them, and they're crying and they're shaking because they had to take someone's life or protect themselves, right? But they're not really built for it. There's another person that could do the exact same thing. Oh, yeah, I fucking pulled out my gun and shot the guy. It is what it is. One less bad guy in the world, right? Yeah. That same thing.
So I only bring that up because if we're discussing what our options are, so at some point we want to integrate Divas coming in. So
if you did 12 classes, for example, and we get this resolved, or you're feeling really good, and you're 7 to 8 classes in, and you're like, Jesse, can we use the remaining classes for our other dog? I have no problem with it. Again, I don't charge per dog. I literally just go, I'm here. Oh, what do you want to work on? Okay.
And how far out are you in getting?
Right now, because we're coming back from a lull of the holiday, during the Christmas time and New Year's, like training goes down because people are traveling, they're saving for Christmas and stuff. So if you're for in person, I have more availability. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the collars and stuff that I would recommend, because you have potentially 3 dogs, 2 for sure, correct? Is what I would recommend, you don't have to, but it'll be convenient, is Dogtra allows us to set up what's called a family system, where it's remote to both dogs, okay? You can also do remote to dog, or one remote to both dogs. But what you're gonna find is, oh, I need so-and-so's remote, or where's the remote for the dogs, okay? I've done this a lot. So when you get the family system, you have your remote. You each have your own, and you both have control over both dogs all the time, okay? I would have to double check. I believe the model is still available, but there's also a model that goes up to 4 dogs, okay? So then you could theoretically each have control over all 3 dogs. I would have to double check. I don't see why not, but I would think you could also set that up as a family system, okay? If that's the case, you'd want to let us know sooner rather than later, because we have to send the collars to Dogtra. Dogtra pairs everything them. Yes, we can't do that in-house. I can do one remote to 2 dogs, or even the remote to multiple dogs. But when it's remote 2 dogs, it has to be done by Dogtra.
Yeah.
And that's usually anywhere between a 2 to 3 week turnaround. Okay.
Do you know what else Dogtra sells? Have you seen some of their other equipment, like in relation to retrievers and for wingers?
What about it?
Have you seen those?
Mm-mm.
So there's a catapult type device that you pull the thing back. It's like big rubber bands, and there's a pocket, and you can put a duck in there.
Oh, sure.
And then it's a dog treat, there's a unit on the side of this thing, and then there's a unit in your hand, and you can press one button, and it makes a quacking noise.
Oh, really?
So now the dog is at your side,
Uh-huh.
and
To test.
something's coming,
Mm-hmm.
and then you press another button, and it releases the catapult, and you can also add a blank to it. So there's a gunshot, there's a duck call,
Fun toys.
gunshot, flying bird,
Mm-hmm.
and so.
I've not seen that. Yeah,
It's in
that's
our
funny.
yard if you wanna come.
Oh, really? That's funny. Where are you guys from, by the way?
Prospect Heights.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
The suburbs.
Sure, I
Arlington
gotcha.
Heights, Wheeling.
Sure, I gotcha. You're out
Yeah,
there.
so they make a ton, but they're also unique so that you don't, when you're doing it, the other guy's unit doesn't fly. You know.
Yeah, that'd be funny though if it happened. Like, what?
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm familiar with dog tread. So yeah, that's great. That they're,
In my opinion, they're the best training brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the best. So
So we have to talk as a family, and we've got our daughter. And
Yeah.
we have to decide what
if you did,
We can,
turn around a decision.
yeah, and you know, take your time. If your intent is to rehome the puppy, right? The remote collar will definitely give you, in my opinion, a higher probability because then you can send them off going,
can transfer.
yes, we can transfer that.
So he'd have his own, not paired to us.
Yeah, so that I was gonna say, if you know, if you're planning on keeping them, then the other system makes sense, right? Because then it's like, okay, whatever. But if it's like, no, we'd like to send them off, then you just get his system separately, and then you know, when you go to rehome them, what have you, you just literally teach them what I taught you. I've worked with fear aggression plenty of times. Remote collar is the only tool that allows us to correct the fear aggression without actually creating fear. Okay.
Okay, nice.
Because the dog doesn't know where it's coming from. We will experience fear, the dog will experience fear, but it will bring him back from the fear. That's what you don't have. Food, so the desensitization exercises, I'm not opposed to. But if nothing ever says you can't do that, it always is an option.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the thing, like the power of consequences, that is not appropriate, figure it out, do something else.
Yeah, if there's never a negative consequence, why would you stop?
Correct, right? If it's always food, and he's like, okay, well today I don't care about the food. I'm gonna bite you.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's, I'm familiar with training, and they suggest that you, whatever you're gonna do your lesson, that you're gonna work on,
Mm-hmm.
either give them a half portion of whatever meal or wait.
And use,
wait
yeah.
a day until they're hungry.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So I'm not against what you're doing. I would say continue with it. But it's not going to completely resolve because the other thing is like once if you rehome that dog, let's say you rehome him to a very passive family, that dog is going to be a menace.
Yes.
I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Because fear will become a bully. And the fear goes, you're weaker than me. And then it starts to do more.
But in your video, you describe fear as a dog that's going to be barking, 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 doesn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
This one doesn't do that.
Yes. So in that particular context,
He's just, when someone walks in, he's running, like someone be my leader, someone make me secure.
but he's moving away.
He's
Yeah.
running.
Yeah, because he's at least in that particular moment not confrontational, right? Because you have every instance is the same. Okay, so not all dogs will start barking, but it's like the most common way or the most obvious way to explain to a person like this is how you can recognize.
Gotcha.
Correct. Yeah, but everything that you're telling me, I'm going that's fear for sure. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so.
I think we've covered a lot, Jesse, a lot.
Thanks for your time.
No, you're welcome. So Tina will, of course, send you a breakdown of everything.
Yeah.
If you're planning on the puppy, I would suggest longer because then towards the end, and once you feel like, oh, we're good, right? We can,
Purchasing a longer package.
yeah, like if you did 12, for example,
Right.
I don't know how many,
Take him for his off-leash
yeah,
recall. He loves to walk with the dogs running and.
sure.
Yeah.
And then towards the end where it's like, we feel good with this, we can always switch, start working with the puppy. And it doesn't mean that we can't always go back and then readdress something with you guys. Remember, you're just paying for my time. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Awesome. It was a pleasure meeting everybody.
likewise. You look in person like.
I'm
Beatrice.
gonna start.
By the way, she's a sheep herder.
Sure.
She goes in.
Oh, yeah?
the ring
Does
with
she go-
sheep. Yeah.
Up in Wisconsin. My stepdad's